It's my pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker. Amir Mešković has grown up in Dubai, and all of his pre-university education took place in Dubai. Later on, he finished and he obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from the Southeastern University of Washington, D.C., followed by MBA in e-commerce from the University of Missouri in United States of America. He's an IT man, and he has an IT career, which started in the Department of Civil Aviation for the government of Dubai. He was an IT specialist for Dubai Airport, and later on he spent a couple of years working for Emirates Airline as R&D manager in the IT department. Today, or the last few years, and Amir will tell you more about it, he has founded an IT company which works in the supply chain. His companies are called Optimus and Sourcecode, and are very successful in dealing with, I think, micro distribution and logistics, and giving platforms, IT platforms, for optimization and efficiencies in that area. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Amir Mešković. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Mr. Filippi and Zagreb School of Management for inviting me to come over and share my thoughts on how far is far away. An alternative title to this presentation could be also, it might as well be in China, because currently, with the current state of supply chains everywhere, even if something is in a city next to you, you still might have the same delay issues as you do if it's in China. So as stated earlier, my background is basically in IT. However, when I founded Sourcecode, which is a company that I'm going to be talking about a bit later, basically we started off by saying, let's see what our customers want, and then let's build that together with them. Today, I can say that I'm proud that we've got a platform called Optimus, which basically deals with two major factors of every business, which are basically sales and logistics. We've got about 300 plus clients in the region, and we basically work with just about every major brand there is, whether it's in manufacturing or distribution in the region, including Coca-Cola in the presentation that you had earlier. So the platform that we have built together with our customers and keep on growing, because obviously, as you may know, technology keeps on changing, and then challenges keep on cropping up, like this whole supply chain issue that we've got now. We try to apply the latest the technology has to offer in order to try and resolve the challenges our companies have. So enough about our company. We are the best still. We'll move on to the issue at hand. From the following couple of slides, I'm going to reinstate the problem, or reinstate some of the issues that my colleagues before me have already touched upon, and put some sort of a financial aspect to it all, and then through the following slides show you how the current companies are trying to resolve the challenges that they're being faced with. As you can see from this slide, as of October 2021, which was 2 months ago, we've had about 584 container ships that were stuck worldwide. That basically means they were waiting to be offloaded. That number is obviously double the number that we had at the beginning of 2021, and the latest updates indicate that as of December, so the current month that we're at, this number has further doubled. So now we're looking at about 1,000 ships worldwide that are stuck. And the number of days that are stated at this slide have also doubled. From here, we can see that the least efficient major port is currently Los Angeles, which again is to be expected because 40% of the overall inbound traffic that comes out of China and goes into US actually goes through the Los Angeles port and the Long Island port that's adjacent to it. So obviously, when something like this happens, one of the major impacts to the overall supply chain is that the shippers are going to increase their cost, or they're going to increase their fees. So shipping a 40-foot container at the beginning of 2020 was about $1,300, $1,400, and then these are figures obviously between China and Los Angeles. And that's basically gone up to $25,000 as of October. Now it's about $32,000. So if you look at just the figures between 2 months ago and now, they're actually growing at a faster rate than they did over the overall year. Another reason why this is, if I can say, why the shippers are so effective or efficient when it comes to increasing their prices is that 85% of the overall trade or overall shipping that happens worldwide is actually done by 3 companies. Only 15% is done by smaller companies. So we're talking about people like Maersk and Evergreen. And the reason why that is because, again, in 2008, 2009, when this part of the industry was at its lowest, these guys invested in huge ships. Now, having huge ships, economies of scale, you're reducing down the cost of each and every shipping container. And obviously, with that, you're taking on more market share. So what's causing all of this right now? I mean, why did we reach to the stage that we're at now? Digressing from this slide, I think I can safely compare the current situation with supply chain to a couple of years back when we were all using SMS or short messaging service, when we were sending messages not through Viber and WhatsApp and what have you now, but when we were strictly relying on short messaging service. What would happen is that, telecoms would sit and plan their network capacity over a span of a year, look at how many customers they've got, and then estimate the number of SMS messages that those customers would send over a period of a year. Obviously, little do they know that, at the end of, on 31st of December, at the end of every year, at 11:59, everybody tries to send Happy New Year message to everyone else, and not just one, but you're trying to send it to a multiple number of people. Now, this obviously causes a massive influx of messages that need to be sent, and the network breaks down. So nobody gets any messages for a period of 5, 6, 10 hours. You start receiving messages the next day that were sent the day before, because the network was not designed to handle this kind of load. Now, if you look at the overall infrastructure, and then you start saying, well, why don't they make the network to be able to handle this sort of load all the time? And then you reach a conclusion that that's not feasible. I mean, there's no point in creating something that's got a capacity of sending 1 million messages a second when you're, in reality, sending 10,000 messages a second. So if you take that scenario and you compare it to the current supply chain, obviously the increased consumer demand triggered by COVID lockdowns, as the slide states, this is something that's causing the current backlogs. This obviously is an accelerator. It's not something, I mean, we would have reached this stage probably later, maybe 2024, 2025. Not now, but it's something that got us there faster. It's not to blame. Seasonal increase in consumer demand. Now we're looking at figures that are basically also spiked up because we're a Christmas season. Shortage of skilled labor, which I will tackle a couple of slides later. Ripple effects caused by late arrivals. I mean, supply chain is basically every link is relying on another link. So if you've got a freight ship that's late to be offloaded, then that causes all other segments of that supply chain to be late as well. And so nobody can plan properly and nobody can react in time. Obviously, outdated infrastructure, inadequate ports, warehouses, and terminals. The system was not designed to handle this load. The system was gradually designed to be able to handle maybe, I don't know, 50, 60% of what's going on right now. And the speed at which the new orders were arriving before was a lot, the pace was a lot slower than it is now. Coupled with that, the government regulations that are being put in effect now due to COVID restrictions and everything. We've got issues with factories being locked down 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time. Companies or factories not being able to produce the ordered goods because of the lockdown. When they return back to business, it's not. We're not looking at a fact that during those 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, no new orders came in. They were not able to produce or manufacture the orders that they already had on hand, and now because they were locked out for 2 or 3 weeks, they're getting new orders. So the backlog just keeps on being built. Again, shortage of containers, chassis, warehouses, terminal space. Now, there is absolutely nothing in the supply chain right now that we can say is in abundance. Everything is in shortage. I will give you an example again later on where one of the companies tried to sort of get a jump start on this whole supply chain mess, and they basically have somehow managed to create an environment where it's not as bad if you do business with them. But I will also tell you what the cost is of that and how their strategy has actually made the whole situation for everyone else a lot worse. But we'll come to that. Again, we're in the season right now where weather conditions also play a major role in terms of ports being closed due to cyclones, hurricanes, at each and every port. The weather conditions are not favorable. You've got closures happening all the time. The reason why there's a small star next to closure of terminals and weather conditions is that these two are more or less predictable, because we can sort of say that yes, at the end of December or during November, there will always be an outage of 2, 3, 4, 5 days. We're going to have a certain port closed, and you can basically plan that if you're planning long term. So now, when it comes to the last mile delivery struggle, now the last mile, obviously, is once you get your containers off of the ships, and then you get them onto trucks. The trucks bring them to your warehouse, and then from the warehouse to you're doing distribution to your customers. That's called the last mile. So once once you look at how complex those logistics are, you're also going to realize how this whole thing is going to have a ripple effect on the last mile delivery as well. Now, again, expectations of shorter delivery times. This is something that we as end consumers are basically used to. So everything you click on Amazon, on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, I mean, we are not inclined anymore to wait for anything. We'd like things to be here within 2, 3, 5, 6 days. Overall demand has increased as well. So it's not that we are not only willing to wait, we are also buying a lot more than we should be. Reasons, I'm not saying should be, but basically then we're buying a lot more than what we usually are. So if you look at issues like how many products have been custom created to fit our needs, because Facebook reads our profiles, they see what our buying habits are. They see what we have visited, where we've been, and then all of a sudden you come up with an ad that says, people born in 1977, and especially in October, are the greatest people on the planet. And being that I was born in 1977, and in October I just had to get that shirt. So did I need that shirt? No. The last mile delivery also suffers from a non-uniform delivery fleet, because obviously whilst the first mile and the middle mile can sort of have uniform fleets, the last mile delivery has issues with your orders being delivered that are of different sizes, that are of different materials, that are different quality, plus they require different or varying temperature regimes. So you've got cold chain deliveries, you've got regular deliveries, you've got basically you're working with products that are not uniformed like you would in first and last mile, where you would be constrained to shipping containers. Geographical challenges in the last mile. You've got, let's say, 15, 20, 30 deliveries today, out of which you have to deliver certain items or certain orders to places which have restrictions in terms of which vehicles can approach the loading docks, what time you can approach the loading docks. You've got certain customers that are going to basically put constraints on you in terms of that they will accept deliveries from you between 12 and 2. Now, when you've got 25, 30 deliveries that day, you have to basically schedule that your drop-offs are going to be happening between 12 and 2 at that certain customer. Now, imagine the nightmare in both loading and offloading 25 orders into a truck, which has two or three points of drop-off that are restricted by time. So if in one of them you miss out, first of all, you're not going to be able to drop off what you're supposed to deliver. But the next customer that you visit, everything that you didn't deliver because you loaded it in either through a LIFO or a FIFO system, you're going to have issues or challenges trying to fulfill those as well. Varying drop size and commissioning of orders. When you're talking about the last mile delivery, you also have to take into consideration that commissioning or order picking basically happens at the warehouse level. So once you're delivering something to 25, 30 locations, each and every one of those locations are going to have a different order. Now, if you couple with that most of these distributors have anywhere between 5 to 7 different principals. That basically means 5 to 7 different factories that they represent, out of which each and every one of them probably has about 100 SKUs of their own. You are looking at the drop-offs, which it's almost impossible to get 2 orders that are of same size, whether it's weight, whether it's volume that you're looking at. Again, government regulations play a factor in this as well, basically due to the fact that on top of all of this, you're also going to have certain areas where you are not allowed to enter with a vehicle at all. They're strictly pedestrian areas, and that's going to make your life even more difficult, especially if you take into consideration that your end customer or the business that's buying products from you does not want to take this into consideration because it's your problem, not theirs. So with all of these issues that I've mentioned, what can we expect? Obviously, inflation is going to be one of the effects to everything, because nobody in the supply chain is going to take the costs or the complexities of doing business now versus doing business last year. They're not going to take those costs and pay for themselves. They're going to offset it to the end consumers. Things are going to become more expensive, not because they cost more to make, but obviously they cost more to deliver. Stock shortage, natural. Everyone now that we know things are going to be more expensive, we're going to start buying more. We're going to start, turning our houses into warehouses. And this is something that's specific to the U.S. market as well, because I watched a 60-minute documentary where they've gone through and analyzed each and every step of the supply chain, And the conclusion was, at the end of that documentary, everyone needs to go out now and buy as many supplies as they possibly can, because, everything's going, it's the end of the world, and everyone is doing that now. People are buying water. If you remember what happened during the COVID crisis with toilet paper, and for example, in Bosnia, where I was at the time, people started buying flour for absolutely no scientific or logical reason at all, as if we're going to be, fighting COVID off with sweets and whatever else we'll be making out of that many flour. So what happened there is we also faced a situation where, in order to beat the supply chain issues, we had major retailers send their fleets directly to manufacturers to pick up the goods themselves, so they wouldn't wait for the logistic company of the distributor to actually handle those orders. Now, what's panic buying going to do? It's going to get, we're going to have an additional increase in consumer purchasing. The demand is going to go again through the roof, which again is not going to help the current situation with the current demand as well. Small businesses are going to be, they're highly likely to be shut down because the stock is unavailable, and they impose penalties. Now, I will paint you a picture. This is something, again, that I've seen in one of the documentaries, and it's absolutely unbelievable. But it's one of those cases where in all of this, if you think, how can this get any worse? Now, I'll tell you a story about a small manufacturer in the U.S. They were making children's toys, and they're learning toys. So their supplier was obviously in China. And because they sort of planned that this is going to happen post-COVID, and people are going to be ordering a lot more, they decided in March to deliver all of their quantities that they wanted produced for Christmas season. So they over-ordered. The container came in. It was offloaded. Obviously, it was stuck for a while on ships. It was offloaded. It was put in the terminal, and then because of the current situation, other containers started being piled up on top of their containers. Now, each and every day that your container stays at the port, you as an importer, you are liable to pay the sort of a rental fee for that container being at the or occupying space at the terminal. This person, whilst they ordered their container in March, they had about 15, 20 containers. By the end of November, they were in penalties for about $1 million, which the amount, $1 million, was basically twice the value of the goods that was in the containers themselves. So obviously they couldn't sell anything. They can't get the containers out because other containers are on top of it. Everyone is sort of blaming the other, and this has caused that business to not temporarily but permanently shut down. Drastic decrease in quality of delivered goods. Now, this is also something that's going to have, I mean, all of this is going to have an effect. This is going to be one of the effects. Because the number of orders keeps on increasing, the requests for production is a lot higher. So companies are going to be starting producing goods as fast as they possibly can so that they can clear out the backlogs. Once they start increasing the speed at which they produce things, quality of control of quality is obviously going to start failing. So don't think that if you did get your hands on that TV, or if you did get your hands on that phone, or whatever it is that you were ordering and waiting for a long time, expect it to be of poorer quality than the previous sets that you had. Now, all of this, obviously, as I said earlier, this was a matter of time. COVID-19 was an accelerant. We are being driven by social media and targeted advertising. We are ourselves buying more. We're buying things that I won't say we don't need, but we're buying things that we're not planning on buying. Everything is customized to us, shorter product lifespans. Technology advances now. Basically, if you've got a mobile phone that's older than 1 year, you've got a problem. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, if you bought a phone, you bought a mobile phone, and it would last you for 2 or 3 years. Now, every single year, there is something new that comes out on that phone. It's got a better camera. It's got better this. It's faster. All of a sudden, we're all talking about, M1 chips, M2 chips, M3 chips. My dad recently, who's 74 years old, came to me and he said, should I buy an iPhone 13? And he's got an iPhone 12. And I'm asking him why. He said, no, the 13 is better because it's got a better chip. So what does that chip do to you? Honestly, he says, I don't know, but it's better. And basically that's the result of probably about 15 or 20 ads that he saw on Facebook, he saw offline, he saw wherever he went, telling him that the phone that he has, which by the way was again sold to him by the same company, is outdated. And that was last year. Now, another example of that is that, everything talks to everything right now. So, we want, when we approach our houses with our cars, we want the lights automatically to turn on. We want the gates to automatically open. And then, you invest in all of that. Then you change your car, and then they tell you, this whole setup, because you've changed your car, is no longer working. So that needs to be updated as well, because now your new car cannot talk to your old house anymore. So you keep on buying. And as a result of technological advances, you keep on getting things that are really cool, really nice, but, how useful are they is something else. Now, Nadir is going to be talking about the lean and just-in-time production, but everything in the supply chain is sort of set up to be, we're taking the maximum out of the infrastructure and the people that we have, and we're always operating on around 90 to 95% of our capacity. Now, all of a sudden, the demand went through the roof, and we're stuck. We're literally stuck. Any changes that can be made to the existing supply chain, and if you look at each and every step of the way, first mile, middle mile, last mile, requires major investments into infrastructure. Now, in case of Los Angeles and Long Island, the port is actually not owned by the government. The port itself, yes. The actual offloading, yes. The terminals around it, no. The government has basically sold those terminals or leased those territories out to private companies. So if the government now, as it was, I think, earlier mentioned, that Joe Biden is creating a special task force to try and sort this out. Yes, the government may tell the local port authority, look, you have to work 24/7. And they will. But the problem is once they offload those containers, if the private companies that are holding the terminals also don't work 24/7, what will they do with them? Keep them in air? They won't. So the only way to actually do this is they have to either go in and invest money into terminals that are surrounding the Los Angeles port, or this won't work. Now, again, if you look at it from that perspective, how is the government going to invest in a private company? And even if it finds a way, it takes too long. We're talking about really, really, really large investments here. Now, I said earlier I'm going to be talking about someone who's actually sort of beat the whole supply chain issue now, and that's Amazon. What Amazon has done is during 2020, Amazon has invested $60 billion in trying to take as much of the supply chain out of others' hands and try to keep it in-house. Over the next 5 years, Amazon is probably going to end up being the largest logistics company in the world. What they've done is they've started purchasing their own containers, which again has caused a shortage of containers in wherever they're making them in China. They started buying off their own boats, which are medium-sized and small-sized boats, which are basically used to offload their own containers off of the large boats. And whilst, yes, have they predicted this well? Yes, they have. They've expanded their warehouses. They've made more additional space available. But at the same time, by doing that, they've basically, further pushed the or created more problems in the supply chain for everyone else. The great expectations, again, imposed on children, causing skilled labor shortage. Now, this basically means that, if you look at all of us and you look at everyone having kids now, especially in Europe, very few parents would actually go and expect their children to be truck drivers or, shipyard workers or anything that's not in quote-unquote management. So everyone's pushing everyone to finish their university, get their university's degree. And if we all do that, and if everyone does that, who'll be left out to basically drive our trucks? And if you look at the last mile delivery or even middle mile delivery, that's an essential part of the delivery system. The American Trucking Association at the end of 2018 gave out a report where they stated that pre-COVID, not before COVID, there was a shortage of 60,800 truck drivers in US alone. Now we've got the same issue here in Europe as well. So if once your container gets cleared off the ship, it gets cleared off the terminal, it's supposed to be picked up by a truck driver, and you can't find anyone. So we have a problem there. I mean, at every single step of the way, we're facing problems. Climate change also causes dependencies on raw materials. Now, the reason why I said that as well is last year, again, California, due to drought, couldn't produce any tomatoes. If you look at how many products they build or they create, so I'm not saying that they outsource it, but they locally produce in terms of like things like ketchup or whatever is tomato-based. They were all faced with a situation where they had to import tomatoes. So if on top of everything else, you're now importing tomatoes as well, again, additional strain on the overall supply chain. So what can people do in order to, or what can companies do in order to try and ease some of this off? Effective planning, obviously, is something that needs to be done well, companies usually do it on quarterly basis. One, they set a strategy on the yearly basis, and then they go on quarterly basis and see if a revision needs to be done. In supply chain, this is something that needs to be done now on fortnightly basis. I mean, we're talking about changing your strategy that's literally dependent on current market conditions, current supply chain conditions. I won't call them market conditions. End-to-end visibility. Very few companies right now have an end-to-end visibility in terms of what happens to their product, where their product is, from the moment it gets manufactured to the moment that it gets delivered. We all have ordered stuff off online, and basically you're looking at 3 stages there. Those 3 stages are not enough. And those stages are, it's left the port in China, it's on its way, it's at your local distribution center, and it's in front of your house. Now, obviously, if you look at the whole of supply chain, there are a lot of points in between that need to share data amongst each other, so that the service suppliers can effectively change their plans based on what has happened at the chain or at the step before. Real-time data obviously is key to this as well, because there are lots of companies here that only do one part of the whole supply chain. They need to be technically inclined to be able to share data that comes in, and they need to start each and every step of their internal processes needs to be measured and logged. Port and terminal ownership, I've sort of touched upon this earlier, whereby I said that that we have instances where in private companies own certain terminals. This is not the case in Europe. Now in Europe, if this is not an issue, so local governments can pump money into this as well. But in Europe, we've got another problem, is that we can't find anyone to do the job. The governments will, provide subsidies, provide money, and push money into these ports, but, who's going to do the actual job? Infrastructure update, obviously. Singapore's port is they've invested $20 billion in their port over the past 2 years. And they probably can handle the whole of the load that Los Angeles makes in a heartbeat. Los Angeles, because they've basically leased out or rented out certain parts of the whole operation, they can't invest anything, and they haven't invested anything over the past 5 to 6 years. So again, it all comes down to how much sense does it make to invest in these things at the time when you're investing them. So was this a foreseeable state that we're in right now? Probably. I mean, Amazon bet their business on invested $60 billion to try and sort this out. But how probable was it that it's going to be this much of a problem? I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, and no one else did, I guess. Again, faster staff onboarding process through process decision-making automation. This is again an issue where even once you do find someone that is willing to do the job, you come across labor that might not be experienced, but basically they're skilled in theory. We need to find ways of getting those people to start working and doing those jobs faster than we would now. I mean, you haven't got the time to wait for someone to, spend 2 or 3 months, getting to grips with their new job. I mean, it needs to be something that's automated, and maybe even, trying to break it down into smaller tasks where more than one person will be doing something that, traditionally one person was doing. Again, I mean, it all goes down to the ability for an organization to adapt to change. Every single step of the process needs to be measured in real time. Predict, reschedule, everything is becoming a formula that's got no constants. I mean, it's all variables. Historical data through machine learning could give us some sort of insight of the process of predictions. Maybe we will not be able to get it right at first, but the more data, historical data we've got, we'll be able to make better decisions. AI tools to solve the traveling salesman problem and scheduling problems in real time. This is again something that traditionally very few companies have used, but now it's become a standard. I will show you at the end 1 or 2 examples on how we use this in our platform to help our customers plan their visits to their customers better and plan deliveries as well. Real-time data, again, has to be the #1 priority for anyone. I mean, you first need to start measuring everything in real time, then you need to start sharing it with everyone else if we are to make sure that the whole chain is functioning flawlessly. And the last thing, as one of the solutions that's being played around with now is obviously autonomous vehicles. There was a company in Norway last month that made an autonomous ship. It loaded it with a couple of containers and left it off somewhere. It went off, came back, said, "I'm back." Great, no people involved. Is this something that they're going to be able to implement in foreseeable future to sort this out? No, it's not. It might be a nice story now, but to actually get the production and producing those ships and cars as well is going to have an additional strain on the existing problem as well. So it's not going to go away that easy. Now, this is an example of a TSP algorithm in sales visit planning. Basically, a traveling salesman problem is a problem that's an NP-hard problem, which basically means that you take on a certain set of locations. In this case, we've got a small territory, and you've got a certain number of locations that need to be visited so that the orders can be made for those customers. So you feed the system with those locations. You put in restrictions on each and every one of them if they do have restrictions, such as time of visit, how long a person can stay at that location. And then you let the algorithm decide what's the optimal way of visiting those locations where your parameters would be, we need this to happen in the least number of kilometers, or we need to have it happen the fastest. And then the system would actually crunch out numbers and come back with, give you your routes for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Even those parameters you would put into the system to basically say that these are the restrictions on the people themselves. And the system comes back with about half an hour on an average of about 1,000 clients for about 10 salespeople. You will get your full plan sorted out over the next month. And then obviously those plans get dropped off to their mobile devices, and then each and every day they actually get their sales routes. Another example here is this is real-time plan execution monitoring. You've got dashboards, you've got data that are in real time so that you can monitor and see absolutely everything that happens on the field. This is focusing on fast-moving consumer goods companies where they've got different roles, they've got different users, they've got different tasks that they need to execute in real time. So once you modernize all of this, you're collecting data on each and every step of the way. You'll be able to plan more effectively. I will just close this out with, I don't know if I've got enough time, but I'll just give you a small anecdote. I was asked recently, what's the difference between effective and efficient? And I couldn't give an answer. I sort of knew what it was, but I just couldn't explain it. So because I was asked, is your platform efficient or effective? And I had to pick one. So when I asked for an explanation of what the difference is, admitting not knowing how to explain it, it basically states that efficient is someone who does their job really, really well, and they're excellent at what they do. Effectiveness is measured with, whether or not what they're doing is worth doing. So we might have companies out there now in the supply chain that might be, really efficient at what they're doing. Is what they're doing worth doing in the current scenario is something that needs to be reevaluated on a much shorter time spans than what's traditionally been the case for that industry. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. If you've got any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have an online question. Can you please tell me, real-time data is part of solution to supply chain problems, but China is not sharing information about ship locations. Is that creating problems?
Well, obviously, that's going to create a problem. I mean, I'm looking at it we're looking at it from a technical side of things, because if your shipment is delayed from the time that it needs to be sent out from the port. Now, obviously, if it was planned on being shipped out on the 1st of the month, and now it's going to be delayed for 4 or 5 days, that's going to have a ripple effect on every other link in the whole supply chain. Ideal scenario, yes, China should be providing any type of information, especially since this is operational. I mean, I don't see the point in not giving us that data or giving anyone that data. Whilst you might not get it from them, you might get it from your manufacturer. I mean, it's obviously if they're not giving it, then we have to estimate it. Then we have to look at historical data. We have to use machine learning. We have to see, and we can that part of chain needs to be estimated. But in ideal case scenario, I think everyone has to start working together now anyway, because it's a global crisis. It's not something that affects only one country.
Okay, thank you for your answer. We have another question on Zoom. So please, following your SMS analogy, how do you see alternative to current supply chains? Is it railroad China is building to Europe? An example of that.
All of these proposed solutions right now are long-term solutions. Now, you know, you're building railroads, you're expanding ports, you're investing in getting the infrastructure better. I mean, it's a domino effect on everything. If you start investing in getting your ports to be to get more terminal space, because that seems to be the #1 problem right now. If you ask them, they're saying we can offload all these ships, but we've got nowhere to put these containers in. Once you sort that problem out, you're going to have a problem of infrastructure or road infrastructure, because those roads that lead to those ports or lead away from those ports are not going to be big enough to handle those many containers, even though you've taken them off the ships. So it's not a simple problem, and it's not a problem that's going to be solved by doing one thing or the other. It needs to be one thing and the other. I mean, everything needs to be basically put in line. How long will this go on for? You know, it's anyone's guess. But in all honesty, looking at everything else in what's happened over the past, 5 to 10 years, this is a peak that's unheard of. And is this the new normal? We don't know. Honestly, we don't know. If anyone's got an answer, I'd love to have it. Star Trek has an answer, but it's not invented yet, and it's called the transponder. What is it called, where they move things without the supply chain? Teleporter, exactly. Teleporter. So until someone invents that, we're stuck with what we have.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to the supply chain event at Zagreb School of Economics and Management.